Hi everyone, here's a quick video to show you the new data lookup control that is in Nintex Forms for Nintex Workflow Cloud. So what is the data lookup control and what is data sources? So if you're familiar with Nintex Workflow Cloud, you would be familiar with the language of a connector and a connection. So just to quickly cover that off, a connection is, I guess it's like your authentication to a cloud service. Like connecting to Office 365, use your connection to talk to that 365. Now, when I talk about 365 in the language of Nintex Workflow Cloud, a connector is used to connect to 365, and then you use your connection as authentication. So that's important because when we come to data sources, if I create a new data source, we're creating a way to get this data from a different system. So let's go and create a new data source. So I'm going to say project sites. I've already made one here down below, but I'm going to make another one. So project, let's call it active project sites. Active project sites. This is a list of active projects. So the reason why I mentioned the connector and the connection is we're talking about connectors here. So I want to connect to SharePoint Online. Now, it only shows a couple of things here at the moment because SharePoint Online is the first one we've released. We're also doing Azure Active Directory. But also there's a couple other things that I've added around a custom extension. Now, custom extension is, if you're familiar with like APIs and putting a Swagger definition into your API into a Swagger definition, or you've built a custom connector, which is an extension, then they will appear as well. So we support SharePoint Online, Azure Active Directory, and custom extensions as well. So since we're wanting to connect to SharePoint Online, I'm just going to make it simple and connect to SharePoint Online. Now, SharePoint Online knows about things like query a list. So once I select this, it's going to actually show me the additional things it requires for that API. So selecting that, and it comes back with a whole bunch of other things. So in the future, when we support Salesforce, for instance, it's going to have different operations, and then that second part of the form will actually fill out based on the requirements there. So I've already got a connection to my Universal Forms 365 tenants, so I've already set up a connection. There are other videos talking about connections if you're not familiar with those, and I'll link those in the comments below as well. So then I want a SharePoint URL, so I'm going to go across to my 365 site here. So I'm going to go say Process Fest, copy that one, put that into the project sites for later. So coming back here, we'll put in our Process Fest link. So connection is 365, and then the URL comes through here, and now it's going to say which list do you want. So project sites, and then if I switch back, we're going to say, well, I want site, project number, state, and project manager, for instance, something simple. So I come to my fields, and I'll say something. What did I just say? Project manager, and site would be helpful, and let's say state. Let's do state. So you can select the number of columns you want to select as well. So I selected a couple of columns, and since it's 1,000 records, I'm going to say 1,000 rows to return. Now, what we can also do is have conditions on this data source as well. So I'm going to say, well, when the project status, if we cross to project status, is active, rather than I want to see the completed projects, I'm going to say the projects that are active. So equals ignoring case, and we say active. And summary is pretty much that. You can just say only show active, or hang on, project status equals active. The mouse, active. Okay. So that makes a bit more sense if I call it that way. So that's going to automatically filter. It's all automatically going to go to SharePoint with those conditions to say only give me the active ones. Don't waste my time in filtering it out when I get to the form. So we're going to save that data source. Now that data source can be used across multiple workflows and multiple forms, so you can reuse it, and rather than having a bunch of connections or a bunch of controls with all that configuration in other places, you can reuse these connections across all your workflows. So now we'll go and create a workflow. And we'll say form, design a form. Okay, so now you'll see there's a data lookup control, dragging the data lookup control. So it's got a slightly different configuration to other controls before. So we're going with a new menu. It's a little bit like the task configuration, selecting the data source configuration. Now you'll see I've got two data sources now. So the one we created was the active project sites. Selecting that, and it comes back with some conditions. We won't worry about conditions for the moment. We'll just make sure our connection works. We're going to call this active project sites. Okay, so I'm going to select, and so these are the three fields we selected so we can get to use them. So if we needed something else, go back to your data source, configure it to the data that you actually need. So I'm going to say I'm only interested in site and the option value. So if you're familiar with HTML select controls, they have the label and the value behind it. So everything else is pretty standard to Nintex Workflow Cloud forms, so you can have required, visible, read-only, those sort of things. So going to preview, hopefully this is going to go off through my connector, which is Office 365, using my connection, talking to 365, pulling that 1,000 records back through, and will appear in the drop-down. So here we go. Here's all my data. Here's my 1,000 rows. And what you'll notice is this is the same control. If I was to drag on a choice control, it's the same functionality. So if you've got a lot of choices, and I'm looking for FOR, you've got type ahead as well. So 1,000 records, not a problem. You can actually go and type things and find the option that you want. So that's pretty cool. You've got some SharePoint data coming into your choices now, so people don't have to type those things in and get them incorrect. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what if I wanted to have a bunch of states and filter it before that? So we could actually do that. So let's go and apply changes, and we're going to say publish this. Okay, we'll do an action set. While since I built a workflow, publish, and I'm going to say testing. No, let's call it something more appropriate. Active projects. Let's call it a hazard report workflow. That'll do. Okay, so we'll publish that. We'll go back to our data sources, and we're going to create another data source. Going back to, I think I had a state. States. There we go. So we've got a states list. So I've got a bunch of states in here. So what I want to do is go back here, close the designer. I'm going to make another data source, because sometimes you might have a list of offices or something that you maintain semi-regularly but not all the time. So you don't want to go into every single form and update all those choice controls. This gives you the ability to update in a central location, all your offices, for instance, and they'll update your forms everywhere. So let's go and add a new one. This is a simple one. We're just going to call it states. List of states from 365. So again, we use our SharePoint Online connector and query a list. Go connection. Oops, my connection is not coming through. Why not? There we go. Office 365 SharePoint URL, which I need to copy from over here. So only the site. You don't need the list. Go back here, put in my URL. Clicking on the tick, it's going to go and look at for the lists, and we should have states. There we go. And really, I only need one field. I just need states. So once that's come back, we select title, because I forgot to rename the column, so it's just title. Okay, so we've got title, and let's say we'll only want, I don't know, how many states are there? There's 50 something, 50? Let's say 50. Save the data source. Now we're ready to go. We don't need to do any filtering or any conditions, so we'll go back to our workflows. Go back to our hazard report workflow. Okay, so I've got our form again. We'll open up the form. So now we've got the active project site. So it's being filtered automatically at the data source level, but what I'm going to do is put another data source. Actually, I've got the copy control feature that came through recently. Let's use that. States. And I changed my data source. There wasn't much use in copying, but I still felt like using it anyway. So we'll go and select states. Oops. Actually select the right thing. No conditions required. Go back. Okay. and we've got title and title. Okay, so now if we go to preview, we'll test out our work. So hopefully we should see a list of states in the first one, and then active project sites in the second one. Okay, so that's got 50, so too bad. There's our list of all the states, looking good. And this one's still trying to get, oh there we go, 1,000 records back, so it's got a bunch of different things in here. So too many records for me to go and find the active project. And this is filtering active ones, not the completed projects as well. So I want to connect this one to this one. So I can go back to Designer, click on this one, and I can say data source configuration, select the configuration. So I say when state is equal to insert variable form controls states. So state filter. Add the condition. So a little state filter in there. We can edit and delete. Back to the configuration. Go to preview. Let's see what happens now. So I've got Alaska, Florida. Let's go to Florida. So Florida is going to get passed to active project sites, and hopefully we should see a vastly reduced number of sites in here. So it's going off and interrogating the list of sites, and that looks much shorter than what we had before. So we've got Division Road. So if that's the top one, if I change that to Georgia, goes away, sends that parameter to the data source in NWC. That goes to find all the list of projects and bring it back to this choice. Let's go and have a look. There we go. So changing it to Hawaii. No data provided, so we've got no projects in Hawaii. That was good. Let's go to Idaho and see. There we go. So there's only 2 choices in Idaho. So yeah, so that's what it does. That's the data lookup control. So as I said, you can define a data set at your portal level. You can reuse it across workflows. You can put conditions at the top level of the data source, and you can also put conditions at the form level. So you might just want to give a whole bunch of people in the workflows access to your projects, your list of projects, and you want to say just only give them the active ones. So when they come down to the form level, they're just doing the active ones and they're putting their own filters on top. So that's how you configure it. You go to the data sources in the portal level and you put on a data lookup control and start using data from SharePoint. As I said, you can also get the data from Azure Active Directory, or you could also build your own custom connector or custom extension, which is also a really good thing to do. I hope you find that helpful. Let me know in the comments. Cheers.